Hey YouTube world, today we're not in the shop. Today we're working in my garage. And today we're going to be taking this shaker panel, relieving the back, cutting it on the table saw so that this can be replaced with glass. It's just a standard shaker door. This is actually a end panel we pulled off an island. They're all the same. A lot of the companies will actually just send you extra doors to mount onto the side of the island. They're made all the same way. It's a 5-piece front, meaning you have 1, 2, 3, 4, and the panel being the fifth part. Fifth part's what we're going to take out so it can be replaced with glass. The reason we're doing this, a lot of people out there have these old cabinets, and I don't need to explain to you how expensive cabinets are. A lot of people, I go into their house, I pull their cabinets, and there's nothing wrong with their cabinets. They're just out of date. They want to update them. You can do that without replacing your cabinets. Particularly oak. I always preach to people on oak because oak is so grainy that it hides brush strokes and latex paint really well. That's the prime choice to repaint as far as old kitchens go. And you can replace the hardware, the drawer boxes, and you can flip it into a new kitchen. Today, like I said, we're just going to cut this panel out. Now, shaker is in. This is actually a relatively new door. It's a misfit off a job, so it's going to get thrown away. So a lot of the older jobs will have these huge, hideous raised panels that are just frankly out of date right now. Hang on to them another 20 years, they'll come back around, everything retros. But for right now, raised panels are out. People are going to a shaker panel. They want the flat look with less detail. So we'll get started on that. And I'm going to show you guys how to cut this panel out using just a table saw. For those of you that use routers, router's going to be the best bet. Not everybody has a router laying around, but you might happen to have a crappy table saw laying around. You don't have to have a Primo table saw to do this. I'm going to show you how we're going to do this on the table saw. Now, the back side of our door, it's going to be seen. Now, on your door, you're probably going to have, just illustrate. You're probably going to have a couple Fastener cutouts in a circle with 2 dowel plugs here where your hinge cup is. Don't be alarmed that this don't have it. Like I said, it was just a panel off the side of an island. It's the same exact thing. They just didn't drill this for a hinge. Don't be alarmed by that. Also, we need to protect this back side because this is the back of the door, and even though we're cutting this part, the remaining part we don't want to scratch up. The idea is this door is already painted. We don't want to have to paint this door again. Now, if it's in a situation where you are going to be painting the doors, then it doesn't matter so much. You got a little more forgiveness. If you scratch something, you're going to paint back over it. No big deal. So if you're going to paint the doors, then you don't have to go through this taping process I'm about to show you. But all we're going to do is we're going to take masking tape and we're just going to put it right on this back side so that as we slide this door across the bed of the table saw, it doesn't scratch this up. You still want to keep that relatively nice. So, all right, let's do that. Pretty basic. Now, the idea is we don't want too much of this tape going in here. Also, before we get started, I'll get ahead of myself. Okay, on a 5-piece door, you're going to have on the ends, and they can be hard to find when the door's painted, there's going to be a mortise and tenon joint. Because you can't see it through the paint, I illustrated it kind of with a pencil mark here. So I don't know if you can see that. But that's just my pencil mark, and that's what the tongue and the tendon looks like. Now, we have to make sure that on the back side, we're cutting this part out right here. But you can't cut all the way through, otherwise your cut comes to the top. So we're going to show you how we do that with the table saw. So after you figure your tongue out, traditionally they'll go 3/8 to 5 inches. So there have been times where you just can't possibly see the tongue. So if that comes about and you have a multi-tool, something convenient you can cut with, or if you're really careful with a drill bit, usually you can start your first 1/4 inch and you're usually safe. Chip that away or cut through it. Don't go all the way through. You only need to go in about 1/8 to 3/16 of an inch. Cut through and see how far over your panel goes. Like I say, you can always correct that on your saw. Your glass hasn't been cut yet, so you're going to make the glass to whatever size this rabbit ends up getting cut out. Like I said, if you have a router, people usually use routers. They're going to do this with a router. This is just for using a table saw. Pretty simple, this part of it. And if you notice, I don't tape across the whole thing. You can, I just don't see a need to waste the tape. Plus, sometimes when the blade cuts through that tape, it wants to ball it up, and you want to keep this flat. And just remember, this part we're cutting out. So your tape only needs to be concentrated on the part that's left. So let me go around the whole door, and then you'll see. And after you do one, this goes really quick. So at first it might look like, oh my God, I'll never be able to do that. It's not that hard to do. And remember, what I always preach is test piece, test piece, test piece. Key to good woodworking usually is just having some test pieces. All the way, all 4 sides of the door, obviously. And I know what you're thinking. How do you cut it with a table saw and you don't cut all the way through and bring the scurf out the end? That's what I'm about to show you. Okay. So make sure these ends are nice and folded over. You don't want anything hanging off the end. That's going to be riding against your fence. You can just push the tape flat. It's not going to hurt anything. Just don't want anything bumped up. Just tape over the edge. And same thing on the other sides. Tape where I just tear the tape off the end. You want 1 or 2 things. You can take a knife, try to cut it clean. Nothing wrong with that. Just be careful not to scratch your finished product. I just fold the tape over. Make sure all 4 ends are good. Okay. That's pretty much going to protect the backside when you're sliding against the saw. Now, I got an old table saw here. We're not rich here. So there's a lot of scratches and imperfections on this table saw. I rarely find any table saw that is not going to scratch the paint up if you just go sliding a finished surface against the bed of a table saw. Any of them, brand new, doesn't matter. It is good to wax the saw. Take some paraffin wax and wax. It makes it easier to slide the product against. We're not doing a whole lot of sliding on this. You're looking at maybe 30 inches on one direction and 10 inches on the other direction. So not a big deal. We don't need to wax anything. This is a very quick routine project. Not a big deal. Also, once you set up on your table saw, you're not going to change anything. Once you set up to cut, you cut all 4 sides the same way. All right, before we get started, subscribe to the channel, Boone Installations. And let me just start by saying most of the projects I take on the YouTube channels in my garage, it's not for the people with the money. People with the money, just go buy your cabinets. This is more for the people like us. We just don't have the money to go out and buy new cabinets. Cabinets are very expensive, especially now. So this is more for people that want to take what they have and flip it and make it look nice, and not go spend $1 billion on it. So if you're wondering why would someone go to all this trouble to remove a panel out of a door to put glass in it. That is the reason why. This is just a mock-up door. This door is not actually going in any cabinet. So this happens to be some door that came off of a job. This is just to demonstrate to you guys how to relieve the back, pull the panel for the glass. So if you guys have any tips on this, maybe you know more than I do about it even, feel free to write us in. So let's get started. You're going to need tape measure, and of course a pencil. Now for those who don't have the best eyesight like me, you might want to get a Sharpie marker. They do help out tremendously. Sharpie marker. Okay. Now, when you look at the back of your door, you're going to notice that it recedes right there. On this door, it's about 3/16 of an inch. Some doors are going to be a little deeper. The step could be 1/4 inch. Doesn't matter. You just need a table saw blade that's going to come up that high to 1/4 inch. You're not going to bring your table saw any higher than that. So normally what I'll do, I raise the blade a little bit to see how deep I need to cut. Once you make that first scurf with the cut, you can flip it over and you can actually see into the cut about the location of your panel, if you're on or off where you need to be. Like I said, when you start, your best giveaway, whichever side I had it on, right here, is going to be your tongue. And most of the doors that I come across, you can usually pick one side or the other, and you will see the tongue in the right amount of light. You'll see the tongue even through the paint. Now just remember, this male tongue here goes to that piece. That's not the piece you're cutting. This is the piece we're cutting out right here. It's basically going to transfer back here. Now obviously, our blade can't come beyond this point, or otherwise our blade comes showing out through the top or bottom. That's no good. Can't have that. So after you get your tongue tendon location, what you're going to do is you're going to measure over to that tongue. Okay, let me look at it real quick. It looks like 2 inches. You can see that. 2 inches to the outside of that tongue. So it means the space between your blade and your fence is going to be 2 inches. Now, you're wondering, how do I know how high to raise the blade? Well, really, I don't. So we're going to start out with about 3/16 of an inch. Now, another trick too, you simply just use your door. You don't have to go running for squares and all that stuff. If you have that stuff, that helps. But we're trying to make up for this step and not go too deep. So just move the fence out of the way. Crank the blade all the way down. Make sure you guys can see me a little better. Bring it down a little closer. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so this height here coming up and down. Okay, so you crank your blade below the bed. Set your panel on there. Make sure it's not the rail but the panel. And then raise your blade up slowly. And you'll notice it starts to lift the door up. It's when the blade's touching the panel. And you can back on or off from there. But you know at that point that you're not going to be high enough to come through the door, because then it's shot. Nothing a little Bondo won't fix if you're going to paint. Okay. So once we do that, we need just that. Between the blade and the fence, we need 2 inches. Okay. And I need a better camera, I think. So we want our 2 inches. If you go a little heavy, it's not going to hurt anything. You can make an 1 5/16 because you're recreating the cut. Okay. So now, we're not done yet. Here comes the fun part. Let me see you guys down here. You can go run around, look for a fence, and to try to mark all this, but I'm just going to show you how to use it with the door you already have in hand. So this door is pretty well square. So what you're going to do is with this or any type of square piece of wood, you're going to pull this up and then you're going to move the blade back and forth like that. Just till you're about to touch and make contact with the door. Just where it's about to make the first scrape. And that's where you stop. And you take your pencil and you mark right there. Or for people like me, use a Sharpie and mark it. Pencil's going to be a little more accurate than a Sharpie marker, just so you know. All right. And then we go to the front side and we do the same thing. This is going to tell us where to stop at. Then you move your blades just with your finger back and forth. Make sure it's not running. This won't work. Okay. All right, right there. Now make a mark. And right now I'm going to use my pencil at first. Seems to be a little more accurate than the Sharpie. And then I'll add the Sharpie so that you can see a little better. Okay, so I'll come back. The Sharpie ends are so wide. Sometimes you got to pull the product back to actually mark. Okay. All right. Let's see if you can see these two marks, that one and that one. Okay. Those marks just simply indicate where the blade starts to make initial contact on the front and back side of the blade. Okay. Now we know our offset is 2 inches. So we're going to make an additional mark from here. Forward 2 inches and one back 2 inches. Just use your tape measure. I know it seems like a lot, but trust me, once you do one of these, it is so easy. And you don't have to run out buying a $300 router. Okay. So marking 2 inches from my mark this way, 2 inches. And then I'm going to make one off my other mark going forward 2 inches. Because that 2 inches is the same as this 2 inches between the saw blade and the fence. Okay. These first 2 marks that we did, just scribble them out. They're obsolete. We don't need those anymore. The last 2, the ones 2 inches away, those are the ones we want. So, if you want, that's what I do. Makes it easier for me to see my marks. I just magnify my marks a little more. I stand the door up, kind of use it as a straight edge. If you have a square, fine. This, you don't have to run around and look for a square. And then I just put the mark all the way up the fence. There's my mark that counts. And there's my other mark that counts. I'm going to put another mark. Okay. As we start our cut, we need to put the front of the door here, and then we'll easily just let the panel drop and keep it up against the fence. Then you'll push the material forward, and then you stop on this mark. Forget these first 2 marks we put. Obsolete, forget them. That's why you put a larger mark, more permanent mark on where your stops are that are 2 inches back. Okay. So let's get started. I just want to show you guys. Do one run. Now, it's okay to be a little forward of your mark. If anything, if you're starting out, don't try to land right on the mark. You can be forward a little bit. It's going to give you a little more to clean off on the back side, but it'll help ensure that you don't cut too far. So you're just going to let it drop. And then you can either back up toward your mark or just move forward and chisel it out. Whatever you do, you can't be any further this way or your cut's going too far. This is the mark we stop. You stop, grab the front, you lift up. You see that? You stop that. All right. Now really quick, before I go too far. All right, I made my first cut. See that? That tells me I'm deep enough. It cut that piece off. It's only connected on the ends. Don't try to rip it off. Leave that piece on there. When this is done, when we're done running through the saw, then the second step is to flip this, clean the corners out. We're going to be using both a multi-tool, and for those that don't have one, a sharp chisel and a hammer works fine. So I'm going to do all four sides first, and we'll go from there. We're going to go all the way around the door. Same thing. Up, down slowly. Push forward. If there's a bow in the rail, you might have to push down a little bit. I believe this one does have one. Just remember to stop on your second mark. Lift straight up and back. If you lift straight up and back, you won't get any skirt cuts that go across the surface, anything that screws up what you're doing. And then one more long cut. Straight up. Now we've got all four cuts made around. You notice where they stop. And that is why we put these marks on the table saw. That's to indicate where you need to stop at. Now just remember, I landed mine on the mark. You don't have to do that with yours. If you're first timer, our table saws haven't been really friendly with you in the past, which happens to all of us, and you're a little skeptical, you can be away from your mark. Because you can always meet the corners up with your chisel, okay? A lot of people feel a little safer with a chisel in their hand than they do a table saw. I totally get it. After you get enough practice of these, I've probably done 100 of these things. You can dial it in a little more, get a little more accurate. Know where you have a little bit of give for error. Now, another thing before we go too far is this what I want to tell people when they're doing mirror frames or even cutting out these glass door frames. Always make sure that the color of your product is also in the rabbet for your glass. So when I say rabbet, that means the groove that's cut out for the glass. Some people might have different terms. I might get corrected on that. The slot where the glass goes in, which used to be what held the panel in. So if you come down here and you can see, we still have, get it close up here, still have a little bit remaining here, okay? When it's all said and done, we want a clean corner here, as clean as we can get it. So, like I say, I like to do things for the people that don't have money to just throw at these issues. So we're going to try to do it by hand with hammer and chisel. Now comes the chiseling of the back side of the door. All right. One of the main recommendations I have for this is wherever you're driving the chisel and the hammer down onto your table, you want to usually make sure it's the corner of the table or the stiffest part of your table. And in this situation, this is where the leg of the table meets the concrete. This is going to be the most stout part of the table. I'm sure all this is self-explanatory. So before you get started, now this door, like I said, it's a misfit door. When we're done with this, it's probably going to get burned or thrown in the garbage. But for you guys out there that are going to keep your door and use it, if it's pre-painted, then ideally you don't want to damage the surface up. So you want to get you something to lay down. Just keep in mind, if you use cardboard, it's fine. Find you something thin, not the corrugated cardboard that tends just to smash as you hit it. But you do want to put something down. If you're going to be repainting your doors, doesn't really matter. You want the hard contact. So I do have the ability, I have laminate laying around. People don't have laminate just laying around in their house. I get it. So, like I said, a piece of thin cardboard, not corrugated, should be fine. And you're just going to put it on here, to keep from scratching the door, because even though you're just driving down with a chisel, it can still scratch the door if your surface, is not nice and clean. Most surfaces ain't like glass. There's going to be something hidden that you won't see that can scratch your door. So put something down. All right, when they build these 5-piece doors, okay, this is your stile, this is your rail. And always keep in mind, stiles run up and down vertically, and rails run horizontally, just like a rail on a railroad track or a roller coaster. Just remember the rails are horizontal. Okay, when they manufacture, this piece stops about here. This is a full piece that continues all the way through. That means this grain's running up and down, this grain's running this way, and this grain's running this way. So what you want to do is you want to hit the cross grain first. That keeps from splitting. If you hit this way first, you could split that end. So you want to do the cross grain here first. You want to smack and score that cross grain, and then you can, after you do that, you can proceed with knocking the rest of it out. Grain's running this way, and the grain on this is running this way. All right, if you just take this and smack at it, there's a chance you could put a split all the way through here. You don't want to do that. So we're going to smack the cross grain first and score it. Hit a couple times, and that'll score that, okay? And then you just work both sides of the time a little bit. You don't make that swipe until after you scored the grain, the cross grain. And then you go back and forth. Now, I want to show those of you out there with multi-tool real quick. All right, a lot more people these days have these multi-tools, these vibrating saws. I recommend you have one. Everybody should have one. You don't need these high-priced cordless ones. I use them on the job. We use cordless tools all the time. I've seen that the Harbor Freight ones that plug in for 20 bucks work just as good. On most saws, what people don't realize is not always the quality of the saw, the quality of the blade you're using. The blade is actually what's doing all the work. Same as table saw or chop saw is going to last you years longer if you replace that blade when you need to. Okay, these are no different. Now, right now, I just have some kind of bimetal blade on there. I'm not going to say that this is the best blade to use. They sell smaller blades, tiny blades that are perfect for getting in here. So for those of you that have these, you don't want to use the chisel. I think you're still going to use a little bit of the chisel, but here we go. So on the fly, I'll usually use this because I'll have 5 or 6 doors to do in an hour. So, times time. Okay. Same thing, hit your cross grain first. But remember, the important part is that you don't want to exceed past here. If you get beyond this line, now your cut is coming outside of where you want your cuts at, and it'll be exposed and it'll look like crap. Not a mistake I haven't made before. Once again, if you're painting, put some Bondo in it. It's going to fix it. Bondo's great if you're painting over it. If you're not painting over it, it's not too bad. Sometimes you can use some wood filler or some wax, but we're going to try not to do that. The key is to have a steady hand with these. Okay, let's do the other side. And there it exposes the panel. See, our panel's exposed. Now we can see the panel. It'll make sense as you do all of it. But like I said, let's get you back up here. We're not people with a lot of money, so not a lot of money, not a lot of tools. So we want to try to keep it that way on these videos. A lot of people do have these multi-tools. And I get what you're saying, you know, who has a table saw laying around? Well, I'm actually surprised to see a lot of people have table saws laying around. This table saw here, my father-in-law gave me. It's a 1998 jet saw. Things run forever. I got lucky. You know, I had someone, he gave me a saw. You don't have to have a Premier saw to do this. You can use just a regular job saw like that one I have there, which is often what I use when I'm, you know, out away from home working. I travel out of town and somebody will bring me doors to cut out while I'm installing another job. They say, hey, can you cut these doors out for me? It happens. I'll use that saw often. So the good part about this is you don't have to have a really good table saw. You just have to have one with a blade that's decent that comes up at least 1/4 inch. So don't be discouraged by the high price saw. It's not a high price saw. This thing's old and it was given to me. So we're going to proceed chiseling the rest of the corners out. So chisel that one out. And once you get them broken away, you can usually just snap these pieces out of the way. Just be careful. You do want to score the corners before you go too far. Like I said before, keeping the paint job, make sure you have cardboard underneath. And you do want to hit on top of your corner of your table where it's the hardest. A couple scores that way. Score it this way. That's not the finest chisel cut. This way. Just go work both sides at a time. And that piece pops out. And so forth. And my first strike I do is to finish off the paint and finish the corner. Get that corner finished and then come back, smack it a couple more times. Sharp chisel would help. Now, just go along and you pop the panel out. Get you guys some. Okay, panel's out. Let's look at this real quick. Now, inside here, you're going to see these little rubber pieces. They're called space balls. Okay, you just throw them away. They put those in the panels because, a little wood education for you, when they make a 5-piece drawer front, because it's 5 separate pieces of wood, the grain are run in different directions. So for contraction and expansion, you have to leave a certain amount of space between your drawer panel, which was this, and then your rails and your stiles. If not, what happens is, because contraction and expansion, if you have a wood panel, it can contract. And if it's tight against these sides, it'll just pop the joints apart. So they intentionally leave a space, and then they put these little neoprene spacers in there to keep the panel centered. All your doors have to be made that way for the contraction and expansion. Now, from this point on, now that that's out of the way, you can shrink this if you want. So, as you can see, this edge actually turned out okay to put glass in. So I'm not going to mess with it. But if you get a nasty edge or you get a nasty ridge that's left where you could have made it 1.7" rather than a 2". Now you just leave your tape on, leave your marks on the saw, and then just move your fence into the blade another 1/8" or so. Now you can see right here exactly how high you need to bring the blade. You're not guessing. And then you can just totally recut and re-clean the whole thing if you choose to. Okay, this thing's pretty much ready. Now what I will do from here, or usually the people I hand it off to, you take a sanding block and just go over this edge. Make sure there's no pin nails in it. Some of these companies will pin nail the panel along with the space balls. Make sure those are out. You don't want those in with your glass. And then go through and just break the edge. You just want to take a sanding block, a piece of sandpaper, 120 preferably, and just go through and hit that edge. Because remember, you have to paint this. Now, if you're smart about it, and you get enough tape covering on here, the tape that you put on the back of the door to slide across the table saw now is already taped up to paint. So you don't have to tape the back of this. You just have to be mindful of the front. Now, if you think you got a dead on match of the paint, then you should just be able to flip this, watch the edges. But what I would recommend is that you do come through here and tape this inside edge. Even though you're going to be spraying on this backside, you don't want the chance of the paint not being an exact match and then wrapping around the face as you spray it. And then you might end up with overspray on the front. So I still would recommend that you tape that off before you paint it. Also, being that it's getting glass, you don't have to spray it. You just need to get this white. So if you have a small brush and some white latex, fine. You're just trying to get it white so that the reflection of the raw wood doesn't come through the glass. It looks hideous. For those doing mirrors, you absolutely 100% have to paint that inside edge, because I've seen it in the past where there's such a great job making the glass frame that somebody forgot to stain or finish or paint the inside of that rabbit, and the reflection of the raw wood shows through the glass, through the mirror, and that will never go away. You have to pull the mirror back out of the frame and paint it. So always make sure that you paint that before you set your glass. It doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be an exact match. Just getting rid of the raw wood. Now, there's your cabinet door ready for glass. Now, when you do your glass, I'm not doing glass in this video. Don't try to cut your glass tight. Do yourself and everyone else, including the glass guy, a favor. Now, you might be able to just take your doors, if you have several of them, drop them off at the glass company, come back and get them, and just let them do them. If you're a do-it-yourselfer like me, you're just going to bring the glass home and do it yourself. So my opening is 25 11/16. The glass does not need to be 25 11/16. I can easily take an 1/8" off of it. So we can make it 25 9/16. And then our width on our glass, just for this door, our cutout is 8.5. Okay, your glass can be 8 1/4. It can be 8 3/8. Leave yourself a little bit of breathing room. Plus, if you silicone it, you want to give enough room for the silicone to wrap the edge of that glass and really hold it in that frame. Another thing, if you're using silicone, make sure you put small dabs in all 4 corners. Not anything too much, because you're going to put small dabs and then you're going to set the glass on top. You don't want any squeeze out. Then, after you do that, you're going to come with a silicone on top of the glass and silicone around this, a nice bead around this edge. Like I said, though, put your 4 little dots in the corner, set your glass on top. It's virtually going to glue the glass to the frame, and then you do your bead outside of it. Nice smooth bead. Now, some people don't want silicone glass in. Some people want to be able to remove the glass to clean it. I totally agree with that. So in that case, you just get you some glass clips that hold them in. Traditionally, you only need 4 of them. You know, 1 on each style, 1 on each rail. You know, sometimes the most uniform way is probably 1 on top, 1 on bottom, and 1 in the middle on top and bottom. So I actually give you 6 total on this. That's probably how I would do mine for a little extra security. So hopefully that covered most of that. Rice, let us know. We're new at this. The videos, not the actual work itself. I do these all the time. They're very easy to do, and like I said, I like to prioritize our videos as something that people can do at home. Like I said, you don't have a lot of money. Kitchens are expensive, very expensive to redo. I've been doing cabinets for 26 years. There's no such thing as a cheap cabinet, only cheap made. So I've seen it so many times in Orlando, Tampa area where I work, where the cabinets I'm ripping out, nothing wrong with them. Nothing wrong with them at all. They're just out of date. People want something updated. And you can take your old cabinets and update them without having to go out and spend a lot of money and rebuying them. They're all boxes. And today, there's a lot less detail, more of the shaker style, rope moldings, dental moldings. Those are out. I haven't seen those in years. So you'll see a lot less of the detail, more straight lines, more shaker panels. Raised panels I rarely see anymore. I don't even see them hardly on entry doors anymore. It's just part of the trends. So hopefully that video helped you out. If not, write us and let us know. That's it for our glass frame door. And watch for our next video. We're going to make hardware jig so that when you are redoing your cabinets, you have a hardware jig to drill all your hardware with, and you're not measuring for each little door. Thanks, guys.